what the wellness industry doesn't tell you. When I say wellness industry, of course, that's a very broad term. It covers a lot of things. It covers alternative medicine. It covers meditation. It covers mindfulness. It covers corporate wellness. It covers physical, emotional, mental wellness, occupational wellness. Like there's so much that goes into that, but it's obviously of growing interest to everyone. And there are so many modalities now appearing. There's so many ways to go about getting involved in the wellness industry yourself, occupationally and as a practitioner. And we're all kind of coming into contact with it, and it's great. There's a need for it, of course. And it's also not brand new, but it's become very mainstream in the recent past. And there are all kinds of offshoots, including psychedelic medicines and that are practiced both outside and inside of therapeutic settings, trauma work, all kinds of things. So what I wanted to point out in this video is that there are a few pretty broad misconceptions, I think, that come into play when we talk about wellness and can surprise people and can sometimes even really cause a bit of upheaval in people's lives. So I wanted to kind of point these out and just be as clear as I can about what it is that I want to say here and want to get across. If it's something you're interested in and you're sort of peripheral to the wellness world or just getting your feet wet and want to go deeper into it. Now, what I typically talk about in my channel is awakening along the lines of what Buddhists or traditional Buddhists, Zen Buddhists, or maybe Dzogchen practitioners would talk about as far as awakening, Kensho, that very deep transformation at the identity level. And what I'm going to talk about here is, to some degree, how that crosses, how the wellness world can start to cross over into the world of awakening or into that process unfolding for you, and why it's something that is poorly addressed, I think, at least in some circles. So first of all, I just want to say that I'm going to point to a few different issues around the idea of wellness and the way wellness is sometimes not always put forward, the ways we interact with it, the way it's practiced and the way it's taught and offered, that correlate with these misperceptions, I think, that come forward. So first of all, the simplest and maybe most superficial of these is the simple fact that the word itself, wellness, or the idea wellness, carries with it a tendency or a possibility to kind of bypass. Meaning, if your company has a corporate wellness program or something like that, and the idea is that, hey, you're overworked, you're working hard, you're stressed, come to us and we'll show you how to feel better. We'll show you how to feel more well. We'll show you how to feel more relaxed, more balanced in life, and so forth. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but it can be somewhat deceptive in that many of the modalities that are used and put forward now in wellness, depending on how they are offered, can be very potent, actually. They can be very powerful. And sometimes with that potency and powerful nature of the modalities, like mindfulness, meditation, and certainly psychedelics, not that that's going to be in a corporate setting, but yeah, when people take psychedelics, similar things happen, that it can really drop you into a space you didn't expect. And wellness may not be the first word that comes to your mind when you experience that kind of thing. So I think the first thing I want to really say is that almost the oversimplicity and lack of nuance in just talking about wellness in general, and sometimes the language that can be flowery and a bit stereotyped about wellness and what to expect when you go to a certain kind of retreat or a certain kind of process and so forth, can be misleading in that if we're talking about deeper transformation, you may start bumping into material and experiences that surprise you and that don't quite feel like wellness. Feel like something else, right? So that's kind of the gist of what I'm getting at here, but I'm going to really unpack that with some deeper examples. And the second aspect of this that emerges from the first is that As I said, I'm in the sort of awakening space, and anyone who knows my channel knows this. I have a book called Awake, It's Your Turn. And in that book, I have a section in one of the chapters called When the Other Shoe Drops. And what I talk about in this section is that this is really the crux of this misperception, and that is people often don't realize that when you have an experience that feels spiritual, mystical, opening, vast, that feels even a kind of an experience of universal love or universal consciousness, expansion. Anyone who's had this knows it's a very real thing. This isn't just a made up flowery description. These actually happen. And of course, they're wonderful when they happen. They feel like, oh, I always want to live this way. And I feel like I can live this way. There's a way to actually live like this all the time. So when we have those experiences, when we have those somewhat shifts, they're not necessarily a true alteration in identity in the way I talk about, but they are shifts in consciousness, and they can be rather fundamental. When that happens, usually, not always, it's a matter of time before the other shoe drops. And the other shoe drops is something like that opening, that expansion, that sort of dropping of boundaries, of illusory boundaries that feels so good and freeing. What it does is it opens space for repressed or suppressed emotional material to come up. And this can be very surprising, because what your mind is telling you is, oh, I want to stay here. I want to stay in this clarity and this spaciousness, or you start to feel it fading or contracting, and you feel like, oh, I got to get it back. I got to hold on to that. But what's coming up is not letting you do that. What's coming up is actually pulling you almost into a contracted space, or a sense of, hey, don't try to expand out of this. You're actually going to have to feel this directly. You need to come back down and feel this. And that can be extremely uncomfortable, especially when it's been repressed, right? Suppressed. Understand when I say this, a couple of things. One is, I don't mean you did that on purpose. I don't mean you ever chose to suppress a bunch of emotional material. What I mean to say is, and this is part of what's hidden in this belief that wellness is just this thing where you go somewhere and feel better, and you go somewhere and feel better, and the more you do it, the better you feel, is that everybody has repressed material. Everybody has repressed emotional material. Every single person I've ever encountered has it. And the more they move into that expansion, the more they start to shift in their experience, and then even in their identity, the more of it that's going to come up. I've seen that every single time. Now, there's that kind of common shared burden of that repressed material that we all actually have. And then on top of it, there's like personal trauma, right? There are personal traumas, personal injuries, personal harms that were overwhelming to the system, and we buried them, repressed them, et cetera. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but everybody has some of this for sure. And it's very common that when you have an expansive experience, an opening experience, a deep mystical experience, at some point, a few days, few weeks, maybe a month, I don't know, it's followed by the other shoe dropping, which feels quite the opposite. It feels not expanded. It feels really intense. It feels really dense and heavy and challenging, and you may have a lot of resistance to it. You may have so much resistance to it that even hearing what I'm saying right now, your mind may be arguing with me, saying, no, that doesn't have to happen. I can just stay in spiritual, meditative la-la land forever, but I'm just being honest. That doesn't happen. If you go deep enough, this stuff will come. And knowing ahead of time that it's going to come, and it should come, and it's part of the deal, and it's lawful, is helpful. That's why I say it, and I say this frequently, but it's also why I'm saying it in this message, that just know that it's going to happen at some point. It probably will sooner than later, but at some point, if you get a deep enough experience of let's just call it the mystical, you're going to also have an experience of repressed emotional material coming to the surface. That can look a lot of different ways, by the way. It can just feel like a sense of dread or angst or uncomfortable emotion that you're not really sure what it is. It just feels uncomfortable. It could be a very specific emotion. Rage comes up, anger comes up, fear, a lot of fear can come up, and then resistance. You may notice a lot of resistance coming up. Now, understand that this, just like the expansive experience, is impermanent. It's not going to stay forever, but it's part of the deal, and it's important to know that it's part of the deal so you don't really fight it and then try to sort of bypass mentally by pretending it's not there and telling yourself you're awake and spacious when you're actually suffering down here and you haven't addressed it. So that's the next part of what I want to say, is that you may have a really superficial interaction with the sort of wellness world. You may meditate lightly or something like that, or you do a little mindfulness here and there, and it may feel good, and it will feel good at first. And I don't mean to use this in a judgmental way, but at a superficial level, at a certain level, or down to a certain level, it can feel relaxing and peaceful to meditate periodically for short amount of time, to do some mindfulness practice occasionally when you think about it, or even a few minutes a day or 10 minutes a day or something. You can integrate that into your life where it will feel, not always, but often spacious and relaxing and peaceful. But if you dig deep enough, this stuff comes. Yeah. So just know that you may have gotten your toe wet in this space in the wellness world, and none of this has happened yet. But if you get a little farther than your toe, you get down to your foot or ankle or knee, or you plunge right in one way or another, and we'll talk about how that happens, you may be very surprised about how much sort of shadow material comes. So I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news or the Grinch talking about this. I'm just being honest. That's how this goes. So now you're starting to hopefully sense what I mean by what the wellness industry doesn't tell you. Now I want to pause here to explain, when I say this, I don't mean there's a conspiracy at all. And obviously the wellness industry is a very general term, and there are many offshoots and many portions of the wellness industry and many intentions and many levels of practice, and there's very traditional avenues and very non-traditional avenues and all of it. So I can't talk about each one of those individually, but I will say that certainly many spaces within the wellness industry really overlooks what I'm talking about. They either overlook it, or they may not have enough experience themselves. They don't realize it. They don't realize that's what's coming. Yeah. So you may not be well informed because the person who's facilitating for you or teaching you isn't really well informed or well experienced necessarily, or they have had these experiences, but they don't know how to place them, so they just don't talk about them. So all of those things kind of play into this. Now, of course, there are people and processes and traditions who do know this and know it very well, and actually know some great modalities to work through it. And they will caution you that this is going to happen, and they will tell you ahead of time that you should expect this. But I think those are probably the minority still than the majority. With that said, I think we're getting a lot more nuanced understanding and practical approaches based on trauma-informed approaches, meaning like psychedelic medicine approaches, traditional therapy that is trauma-oriented approaches, relational facilitation that really understands and can hold space for trauma and so forth. So there's a lot more trauma-informed stuff coming forward, and that's great. That's awesome. And there's a lot of crossover with that and with the sort of awakening space and so forth. So it is rather a mixed bag, but I've seen this many times where people just get disillusioned because they really expect, I went to mindfulness to just feel better. I just wanted to feel better. That's it. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel better, of course. But I just want to caution anyone that if you just want to feel better and you move into a mindfulness space, you may be moving into a space that is not going to necessarily make you feel better right away. It may make you feel better in the long run, but what you're going to have to go through to feel better may really surprise you, like really surprise you. So that's what I'm saying, that I think it's helpful here to really feel into what's most important to you. It's like, if you're trying to feel better, why are you trying to feel better? What doesn't feel okay about your life? What doesn't feel okay about yourself? Sometimes there are very practical answers to that. Maybe you're just overworked. Maybe you need to, kind of really consider, am I in the right line of work? Am I working too much? Maybe you're kind of living the life that someone else expects you to live, and you just aren't deeply satisfied because you don't feel congruent with your deeper truths. Maybe it's something about that, about really finding what's most important to you and how to move through life. Or maybe something in you says, I need to live truth. I need to get to the root of the problem of my own personal suffering and the suffering I see all around me. That's a good thing. If you're in that space, then from what I've seen, you're generally prepared to go through these phases, these openings and contractions that are going to happen, and the intensity of what's coming and so forth. But again, it's helpful just to sit with yourself and really see, what is it you're looking for when you're getting into any wellness, any kind of, whether you're going to do a psychedelic medicine, whether you're getting into meditation, whether you're going to do a retreat, deeper meditative practice, whether you're, have a teacher of some kind. Like, what is it you really are interested in? And I will also say, a good teacher, a good system won't impose their values on you. They will encourage you to look into this yourself in the way I am. But always be a little cautious if someone isn't that way, if they're trying to tell you what your values should be, your spiritual values should be, what your intentions should be. I don't agree with that at all, and that's going to lead you to some problems probably. So be honest with yourself. What are you really after? What do you want? If it's just like I vaguely want to feel better, part of the problem there is you're maybe not clear on what you actually want. Why do you need to feel better? Do you need therapy? Do you have trauma you haven't addressed? Maybe you do want to dig deep into the identity structure, and that's great too. So really feel into what it is you want. And then that will help you when you move into the wellness space to kind of orient yourself to where you want to go then. How deep do you want to go with things? Do you want to just feel a little better, just a little bit more relaxed? Maybe just learn some nervous system relaxation techniques. Maybe learn some dorsal vagal reafferentation techniques, or actually it's more the opposite. It's a ventral vagal or vagal reafferentation techniques. So there are a lot of ways to approach all of this, of course, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that as many ways as there are that many types of people, and there are that many intentions. So be clear on your intentions, and it'll help you resonate with where you want to go in this space, and how deep you're wanting to go, and how much capacity you have presently to experience the challenging parts of this that are going to come if you really dig deep. So that kind of leads me to the next thing, and that is that I find this kind of fascinating and interesting because I am in the awakening space, and that is, if you go deep enough in any modality, you're going to start having shifts in identity. If you're not interested in that, then I would be really cautious how much you do in the awakening space. I wouldn't go do a week-long retreat, right? I wouldn't necessarily, maybe a meditative practice, but a very light meditative practice, maybe a little bit of mindfulness. Or maybe, again, if it's more trauma-based, like get a good trauma therapist or do some relational work around trauma. That's probably going to serve you better than trying to completely dismantle your identity structure, and then all of that stuff's going to come up and you won't know what to do with it. So feeling into that is really helpful, but do know, and this is like the third part of what I want to say here, is that if you dig deep enough with most of these sort of wellness modalities, you're going to start shifting your identity. You're going to start seeing through the illusion of identity itself. What does that mean? Well, the whole first chapter in my book is a chapter on cautions, in a sense. I say basically, this is the adventure of all adventures if you're up for it, but here's what it includes. You're starting a process that's going to overtake you. You're starting a process you're not going to be able to stop. You're going to see and feel things you did not know were in you, and they're going to feel very intense at times. So I kind of have all those cautions because I want to give people informed consent. But if you read that and you hear what I'm saying and you're like, yeah, I'm in, I still want to see what's what. I want to dig down to the depths. I want to go beyond the illusion of my separate identity. I want to see beyond what I take myself to be and find out what's actually this. What is this? What's happening here, right? Then that's great. Dig in. Like there's nothing here that's gonna disillusion you in the final analysis, in the final position, but it will disillusion you on the path. Yeah, the path is challenging, but the homecoming, you'll be very pleasantly surprised. So there was a famous story. I think it was Trungpa Rinpoche who was giving a lecture on spirituality, awakening, something like that. And he essentially said, if anyone in this room has not started the spiritual process, you probably should just leave. If you have started this spiritual process, take it to completion. And that's really, really, really good advice. And I completely agree with it. I think that it's very common that people kind of get a toehold in this, and they don't realize like how intense the process is that they've got themselves involved in, and then they negotiate with it and they struggle with it. And then ultimately, usually they acquiesce and they realize like, okay, but it takes some time to really let go of your insistence that the way you think you are, the way you imagine the reality to be, the way you imagine the world to be, and the way that you imagine even spirituality to be, may be dead wrong. And none of that's all an illusion. And you're going to let go of all of it. And that may take some time to actually, give yourself the permission to let go of all of that. And so, yeah, go into this with open eyes and some informed consent, and know that if you dig deep enough in any modality, including therapy, in my opinion, if you take it to its logical conclusion, therapy, mindfulness, meditation, inquiry, perhaps even psychedelic experiences to some degree, if you take these things to their conclusion, there's going to be a shift in identity at some point. That's the third point I want to make. And this is something that the vast majority of the wellness industry has no idea about. Some does. It's like some portion of the wellness industry does understand this for sure. But a lot of the more corporate wellness and the, a lot of contemporary spiritual circles and so forth, they don't really know what I'm talking about. They don't know that that's going to happen and that can happen. And that if you're oriented to what I'm oriented to in the talks I give on awakening and so forth, that it not only can happen, it should happen, and it will happen, period, right? So be aware that you're engaging very, very powerful forces when you start digging deep in any well, right? So that's the third thing that the wellness industry isn't really telling you, because a lot of it doesn't even know this, right? And then the fourth thing is related to the third, and that is, on occasion, I know a lot of people who have woken up. I know many, 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 many people who have woken up, and I know many people who have deep, what I would call non-dual and or no self-realization, which is a very deep insight. And out of all those people, I would say the majority of them had a kind of gradual process to various degrees. Meaning, it took some years, a handful of years, sometimes a few years to really start to unbind from all these illusions. To integrate it can take years after that, of course, but the insight practices and the process of unbinding and awakening and so forth take a handful of years for sure, and sometimes a lot longer, depending on what you're engaging in and how direct the pointing is, and how serious you are about it and all that. So it's generally a kind of gradual process, but there's so much variation there. It's punctuated by often momentary shifts as well. Now, with that said, I do know a number of people now who have had very, very deep, very rapid, very unexpected shifts. And sometimes that happens. Okay, let me back up with this. What I've done is made a habit of the people I've encountered who have had this, had it happen that quickly and that deeply, which it's not very common, but it does happen. I've asked them all. I said, because many times they'll say, I didn't ask for this. I didn't know anything about this stuff. I had never read Eckhart Tolle or anything. I didn't know. It just happened, right? But I'd make a point of asking all of them, was there a point in your life, whether it was in like deep desperation or just out of instinct, that you asked for the truth? You said, I just want to know what's true. I want to live what's true, regardless of what it does to my life. In some form or another, did you ever ask that question? And almost every time they say they have. And they didn't realize how potent a question that was. This is what I mean when I say, be careful what you ask for. Look at what you're doing. Look at where you're going and check in with yourself and see if that's where you want to go. Because occasionally, this is, again, number 4. This is the number 4 thing they don't tell you. Occasionally, someone will get involved in the wellness space in a very peripheral way or a very preliminary way. They just learn to meditate, or they attend one lecture somewhere by a non-dual speaker, or they, learn mindfulness, and then they apply mindfulness for a very short time. And all of a sudden, they have this very, very deep, tremendous shift in identity that can be anywhere from destabilizing to devastating to ecstatic to all of those mixed together to indescribable. And it happens. So just know you could go to a retreat and all of a sudden your whole identity structure drops completely away. Now, not common, but it does happen and it can happen. So be aware. And I can't tell you what that's like. There's no way to talk about what that's like, but it's very destabilizing, of course. Even those people, the ones I've met, they end up doing okay. They may end up, I've even seen people in psychiatric treatment for it. I've seen people have all kinds of challenges around that, of course, but in the long run, they generally end up okay. But it's going to take some serious integration, and you don't necessarily want to wake up that way. Not that you have the choice, but that's not the point. My point is just know that you could step into something in the sort of wellness community, wellness world, a retreat, a meditation process, a talk, even by a teacher who maybe doesn't even point that directly, themselves aren't as awake as that necessarily, but something about that space, something about the moment, something about your karma, something about the prayer you said to the universe that said, I just want to see the truth. All it was needed was that catalyst, and your whole identity structure starts collapsing. So that's the fourth thing, is that can happen too. It's more rare, but it can happen. So these are the sort of things that the wellness industry doesn't tell us. And again, I don't have anything against the wellness industry. It's a very broad term. Most people in the industry are well-intentioned, although some are definitely not well-intentioned and manipulative and dangerous. But the vast majority of people are well-intentioned and with various levels of experience. And the reason you're not told this stuff is partially because people don't know, partially because the sales pitch, right? The marketing, it doesn't want to tell you that. It wants to get you to the retreat. It wants to get you to sign up for the meditation classes. It wants to get you to sign up for the mindfulness practices. So there are kind of various reasons that this is not all laid out there, but I think it's important to know. I think it's important to have out there. So let me know what you think of the video. Let me know if you have any experience with any of this, and whether it was clear, whether you want anything more along these lines or have questions. I'd love to hear your comments on it. Thank you.